so we're hanging out at the bar, and we're talking Conan, a bunch of my friends and people I'd met and whatever. And this older guy's there, you know, like, and he leans over and he goes, "You guys really like Conan the Barbarian?" And we sort of all look at him, and a bunch of people look at me, and I go, "Yeah, man, Conan's the best." And he goes, "Are you guys reading the new comic book series?" And I'm like, "Oh, no way. This is really happening. This is so cool." Yeah. And everyone glances over at me, and I go, "Is it any good?"
Hey, you Stygian Dogs. Welcome to part 2 of Conan's Compatriots and my conversation with Jim Zub. Jim shares details on Free Comic Book Day and the Battle of the Black Stone event, issues 13 to 16, some exclusive news on issue number 4 of the Savage Sword of Conan, Garycon, and so much more. So we have issue 10 coming out. We have Savage Sword of Conan number 2 coming out, and then the Free Comic Book Day.
Battle of the Black Stone.
So
the beauty.
What can you tell us?
Oh man. Yeah, it's hard. In some ways it would have been easier if we were talking after Free Comic Day, because then a bunch of our cards are on the table. It's all part of the bigger picture. Obviously, we wanted to be able to have the monthly Conan book work in the Hyborian Age and be this very strong adventure book month to month and year to year. You can just read cool Hyborian adventure. But the bigger picture kind of echoes of Robert E. Howard's ambitious cross-pollinated kind of universe of possibility, and the milieus that he would sort of move through in terms of horror and noir and adventure stories in different kind of time periods. That's the stuff that I don't think that was a new sort of piece that I had never seen people explore to that full extent. You know, Roy Thomas back in the days, he would take other Robert E. Howard stories and he would file the serial numbers off and make them all Conan stories, right? That's how you get Red Sonja, from Shadow the Vulture and all kinds of stuff like that. Yeah. But I wanted to sort of address them in their original source time and place. And the shared kind of lexicon of objects and elements and themes that they spoke to really cool things about pulp, that they speak to really exciting things about horror and fear and survival and, all those kind of things that were moving through a bunch of his stories. And that I felt like we could do that on a cooler, bigger stage, as long as we had a strong foundation. And the monthly book is that foundation. And it's the place where we start up a melody and then it sort of carries off into these other kinds of things. And Bound in Blackstone was like, we can tell a badass story and those ideas will echo outwards. And then Battle of the Blackstone is like, now you see sort of where the potential can be for other characters that I think are almost as cool as our favorite Sumerian, right? Whether that's Solomon Kane or, see, I don't want to say all the characters.
Yeah, no, I don't want to know.
I think Solomon Kane's an obvious one across the board. People
there's the hints on Rob's cover there.
Right. And I realized I was about to just say our entire cast. Yeah. And it's so weird because I've been living with that outline and living with those concepts for months and months and months, in some cases over a good year and a half. And we're right on the cusp of sort of it really exploding outwards. What I can talk about is Jonas Scharf. So I believe Titan had put his name forward as a potential artist for Conan stories. And I had seen some of the stuff he had done at Marvel. And then I saw he had done a really cool Witcher graphic novel that had just dripping atmosphere on every single page. And I was like, man, this guy is something special. We could do some cool stuff with him. And we had reached out originally as one of the artists we were just sort of looking at in general, and his schedule, he was finishing up some stuff over at Marvel. And then he finally had a gap in his schedule, and we met at New York Comic Con last year. And I sort of laid out some of the big picture stuff over dinner, and his eyes were kind of bugged out. Like, what? Like, this is all so crazy, and how many different things were sort of possible, and why I thought his artwork could be such a good fit for what we were doing. And he had signed on to do this, this Blackstone event book that we're putting together. Yeah. And as soon as we sent him all the ref stuff, and Jeff started sending him a bunch of, a reading list of recommendations, and we started to see the sketches coming back, I was like, oh, here we go again. Like, I can feel that electricity in the air. And I think readers are really, really going to love what he brings to the table. Yeah, and the way all these pieces sort of start to interlock and build. And Jeff is such a, oh man, he's such an incredible collaborator. I said right from the get-go, we had to have back matter. We had to have essays in the book. I did a creator-owned book years ago called Wayward. And we have this monster scholar translator named Zach Davison. He would do these essays in the back of each issue. And it just gave people a greater appreciation for the research involved and the bigger picture kind of thematic stuff that you wouldn't have to over-explain on the page. You could sort of get the Cliff's notes or the appendices of what was going on there. And I feel like Jeff does that, just as well, and brings so much of that to the page that people realize that there's a bigger legacy involved. And here, particularly when we're dealing with other characters, Conan casts the biggest shadow, obviously, on all the other Robert E. Howard stuff. But I want to elevate and kind of bring all sorts of stuff into the sunlight and show people how cool it is and how it can all kind of play in the big sandbox.
It's exciting. So we have Rob on this arc. We have Jonah doing the free comic book day. Is he continuing in the next arc, or do we get Doug back?
So Jonas is doing a mini series that's just called Battle of the Blackstone.
Oh, okay.
And that's going to be coming out parallel to the monthly book as well. Okay. So we need to give, because 1 to 12 is so bonkers and we do so much different stuff. We're in the Thurian age right now and all that kind of craziness to come. I kind of told people like 13 to 16, we need to not dial it back in terms of quality, but just like we've gone so big that we have to get personal again. We have to sort of like, what is Conan about? Conan is great adventure stories. Conan is about survival. Conan is about civilization and savagery and all that kind of stuff. Like, we've put a bunch of these ripples out there and we're going to pay those off in Battle of the Blackstone. But our fourth arc is sort of like, oh, okay, don't worry. We're not going to go so wide and so crazy and so epic that you don't see the personal. Do you know what I mean? And so in some ways, 13 to 16, our fourth story arc, drawn by Doug Braithwaite again. Nice. So he's back on arc 4, is like very classic kind of Conan, very simple in the best way possible. Like, just like damn good adventure, big survival, some thematic kind of cool stuff. And we're playing off a particular anniversary that's going to be that we're going to be talking about a lot more this year. It's nice. It's nice to sort of go like, here, this is that cool playground of the big story stuff we're doing. It's almost like, I know it's a weird comparison. In X-Files, they would have like Monster of the Week kind of episodes, and then they would have the big kind of ongoing, crazy, huge thematic story episodes. It's like Battle of the Blackstone gets to play in the big, oh my God, conspiracy theory of equivalent, of X-Files. And in the monthly book, we're also just going to do some cool slam bam. Don't you love Conan? Check it out. He kicks ass and takes names.
That's great. That's good to know.
Yeah.
And Doug's work has been phenomenal.
Man, I've been a fan of that guy's work for so many years. We met at it was a comic and art festival in Northern England, and I was just awestruck by the quality of his pencils and the consistency of his work and his vision. And when it came up as a possibility that we could bring him on, I was nervous. I knew he would be an amazing fit, but I was like, man, this guy's such an established like name, and he's got such a thing. And I was shocked he'd never done Conan before. Right. And we got on a call, and he was nervous because he's like, I'm not a Conan scholar. I've read the stuff and I love the comics and everything, but I hope you guys don't expect me to be an expert. And we're like, oh, we're so not worried about that. That's what I'm here for. That's what Jeff's here for. We'll give you all the supporting material you want. Just tell us you're on board and we'll make it happen,
Yeah,
So,
the juxtaposition, especially like between his and Rob's work, it just
oh yeah,
works so well, right? Like
yeah, yeah,
it's like you miss Rob after the first arc, but then you're like, oh my god, I
sure.
got this. This is wonderful.
But
But
what
you're
I love
eager to
is that,
get yeah.
yeah, Doug made this like story. The arc 2 had this claustrophobic, dark, nasty quality to it, you know,
Yeah.
in Zamora, and I loved the almost relentless horror of the combat that he was able to put together. That issue 8, I describe when the pages started coming in, I was like, oh man, it's like Conan by way of Jason Voorhees. Like he's just this relentless monstrosity, you know, because he's been possessed and he's taking people out. And that 2-page spread where he's going around town tracking the source of the Pictish blade. And I was like, that is everything I wanted it to be. It's got this relentless, horrific quality. And Conan is already a scary, you know, figure moving through this city, but now there's no moral core. It's just this destructive. He is. It's weird using another Arnoldism. He is the Terminator. He is, you know, going to get that damn object. And it was really, yeah, it was really cool to see it all kind of play across the page. Diego Rodriguez's colors are so moody and so potent and so powerful. He's just been a phenomenal, that guy, man. Every time we talk about what we're looking for in a particular scene, he elevates it, you know, and he brings so much out of Doug's line art, because Doug's line art is dense. Like there's a lot going on. There are very detailed backgrounds. There's a lot of figures. There's a lot of intersecting kind of action and gore. And if you don't have the right colors on it, it could easily muddy the waters, you know?
Yeah.
And so again, it's one of those things that when it works, people take it for granted. And if it's not working, you would immediately notice it, you know, for sure.
Yeah, definitely. So I should ask, what else are you working on? And my son would be upset if I didn't ask about Dungeons and Dragons.
Sure. So I don't currently have any new Dungeons and Dragons comics I'm writing,
Right.
but there is still one more to come out. I just wrapped up a miniseries called Fortune Finder that's based on the Planescape box set that they released. There's they released a product late last year called All About the Deck of Many Things, which is this wild and amazing cursed magic item. And so there's a one-shot special coming out. It's already April, coming out later this month, called The Thief of Many Things. And so I co-wrote that with another writer over at IDW, Ellen Boyner, and she's amazing. And the book looks really, really cool. I think people are going to really enjoy it. And it's like an oversized one-shot special, so people get a complete story all in one. But honestly, like Conan has sort of eaten up all of my time and attention in the best way possible, because I've got, you know, the multiple stories going in the monthly title. We've got the Battle of the Blackstone, and then I'm working on future Savage Sword stuff as well. So it's like between all those things, like we had a meeting with James Lovegrove, who's doing that novel, the next novel that's coming out, and that's got a Blackstone kind of a ripple in it as well. And they wanted to make sure, because that's Titan prose, they wanted to make sure that it jived with everything we were doing in the comics. There's other like documentation and consulting and stuff that I'm doing for Heroic at the same time. So it's like just like Conan. And I don't mean that in like a stressful way. It's like in the best way possible. Like I wake up and I'm thinking about it, I'm reading it, I'm steeped in it, and we're putting those building blocks into place. I guess I can say this. It's not that big of a spoiler in that sense. Issue 4 of Savage Sword of Conan. I want to give you a nice meaty piece that you can tell people about. Issue 4 of Savage Sword of Conan is a tie-in to Battle of the Blackstone. And so every story that's going to be in that issue of the magazine is going to take a character and show more depth to how they're tied into our big picture event. I'm writing 2 of those short stories, but then we've got other creative teams that have come in as well. So I'm working with those writers and those artists to make sure that it all kind of hangs together. And the lineup is awesome. The artwork is amazing. I think people are going to absolutely love the issue. And there's and everyone gets to kind of play in the sandbox in really cool ways with it.
Can't wait for that.
Yeah.
Garycon.
Yes.
How long were you at Garycon? I figured that must have been a bit of a vacation for you.
It was weird. So what happened was there's a convention in Wisconsin called Garycon. The Gygax family. So Gary Gygax is the co-creator of Dungeons and Dragons. His family's been putting on this event for several years that celebrates, in Lake Geneva. So Gen Con, which is North America's biggest gaming convention, used to be in Lake Geneva. That's why it's called Gen Con. But they outgrew the city, and so they moved several times. They moved to, I think, Milwaukee, and now they've been in Indianapolis for quite a while now, but it's still called Gen Con because that's the name of the convention. But sort of like picking back up the torch in Lake Geneva, Garycon is in Lake Geneva, and it's a relatively small show most years, but this year's the 50th anniversary of Dungeons and Dragons, so tickets instantly sold out. It went to absolute capacity on this hotel complex, and so they wanted to make sure that a lot of people didn't miss out, so they actually did 2 back-to-back events in the exact same hotel complex. The first weekend was called Founders and Legends, and it had around 400 people, real intimate, hanging out with old TSR freelancers and gaming kind of luminaries and, hanging out and playing games. And then back to back, they did another event called the regular Garycon, and that was 4,000 people. So you literally had this like weird kind of appetizer with this little tight-knit group of people where you could kind of recognize everyone, or over the course of a couple of days you'd see the same people over and over again, and you'd hang out at the hotel bar and you'd chat and you'd game together. And then by the time we got to the Wednesday after that first weekend, people just start flooding in. 10 times the number of people are now going to flood in for the second event, and some people have left from Founders and new people are coming in, and it was just nuts. So I was there for 9 days total. 9 days of gaming. What made it extra special was I love doing Gen Con every year. I love doing tabletop gaming, both because I love it as a genre and I love working in that space, but also because no one expects anything from me there. I don't have a booth. I'm not like doing signings. I get to do all the professional stuff, but I'm not considered in that like gaming space the same way that I am in comics.
Yeah.
And so I'm like a surprise guest star constantly. Like, what are you doing here? And it's like, oh, great. Or, oh, come play at this table, or, oh, guest star on this little, whatever, or come do an interview. It just feels really spontaneous and kind of fun. I get all the benefits and none of the drawbacks. So it was a vacation. It was like a weird Dungeons and Dragons pilgrimage where I got to go out and have this extended, back-to-back event. Got to meet a bunch of the people whose work I grew up on, artists like Errol Otis, who did some of the most famous and iconic imagery from first edition Dungeons and Dragons. I got to just like hang out and talk to that guy, and I wouldn't want to say we're close friends or whatever now, but now we know each other, and I would love to be that dude's friend. But it was just an awesome experience to hang out with those people or see old friends in the gaming industry and just chill out with them. I made a brand new Advanced Dungeons and Dragons first edition adventure module. I just created one that I made specifically to start running at that event, because I knew a lot of people were going to be running original adventures from old D&D. Right. But if you're a hardcore fan, you've probably read and memorized those the way I've read and memorized them. And so I wanted to give people the feel of those old adventures, but not know what was coming next. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I named it after the Crucible, which is my first Conan story I did at Marvel on the monthly title. And the similar kind of concept, the kind of, death trap laden dungeon tournament that had been put together to test people and test their resolve. And that's so old school kind of D&D dungeon delve sort of stuff. And it's a container that you can then put riddles and puzzles and traps and stupid things into, and you don't have to justify the ecology of the environment, or it's literally been built to murder people. So get in there and let's test your metal. You know what I mean? Yeah. And it was a blast. I had an absolute blast. I ran it for 3 different groups of strangers who signed up for the games, and a bunch of them were Conan fans, and they were just absolutely, delighted that I was their dungeon master for 3.5 hours or whatever. And then one night I was hanging out with a group of professionals, and they had heard that the adventure was really good. And so I did a pickup game just one evening with a group of people, like some of the developers of Dungeons and Dragons and Call of Cthulhu and Pathfinder. Like, these are my buddies. And I'm running them in the adventure, and they're giddy and excited and being goofballs. And after it was over, they're giving me like amazing pointed design advice. Like, that was really good, but you know what you could do, and like tune it a little bit better and turn the thumb screws. And I immediately incorporated their feedback into the final playtest that I did on the last day of the con. And the players had an absolute blast. And so now I've got this little adventure in my back pocket that I'm going to be running at other gaming conferences, just sort of getting back to my roots of D&D and stuff. But I had so many funny moments. There was one moment where I was at the bar. This is during Founders, so this is the smaller event. I'm just hanging out at the bar chatting with people, and you'll be shocked. We were talking about Conan the Barbarian. I know. And so we're talking about the Howard stories, and we're talking about classic Savage Sword. You're going to have to probably bleep this. I don't know if you bleep out swearing, but
it depends.
It doesn't work without the swearing. So I'll warn you for your editing passage.
There you go.
So we're hanging out at the bar, and we're talking Conan, a bunch of my friends and people I'd met and whatever. And this older guy's there, you know, like, and he leans over and he goes, "You guys really like Conan the Barbarian?" And we sort of all look at him, and a bunch of people look at me, and I go, "Yeah, man, Conan's the best." And he goes, "Are you guys reading the new comic book series?" And I'm like, "Oh, no way. This is really happening. This is perfect. So cool." Yeah. And everyone glances over at me, and I go, "Is it any good?" And he pauses and he goes, "No, it's fucking amazing." And then he just starts raving about the book. Nice. And he starts talking about how incredible it is. And it reminds him, "Yeah, I'm 16 again. And it's my favorite thing in the whole wide world. I haven't been collecting comic books for years. And now I've got a pull file again. And if you guys aren't reading it, you are missing out." And he's like so intense and so emotionally invested. And I've been meeting these original collectors of the comic series from Savage Sword and from the original series. I've been meeting them at Emerald City and at New York, but they're coming to the table to talk to me. They know who they're talking to. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
To get this complete stranger to be so emotionally invested and not know who he was talking to, the purity of that was so amazing and electric and crazy, and everyone around me is like, "Holy crap, like, it's too good." You know what I mean?
Yeah,
you couldn't have scripted it.
It's like he's a plant.
And it's too good. It's too good. And so I said, "Man, wow, you're really into it. Can I buy you a beer?" And he's like, "Are you serious?" Yeah. And so I bought him a pint, gave him a pint. Everyone is like, "Jim, let him down. Like, this is too good." And I flip my badge over, and he looks at it, and his eyes just bugged out. And he was so ecstatic.
And he's got a great story now, too.
Right. Now he's got the best story of all. So he's ecstatic, and he's so, laughing, and we take a selfie, and he sends it to his wife. And every time he saw me for the rest of the con, he would see me walk the hall or, coming in and out of whatever thing. He would just look over and go, "Hey, Jim, how's your day going?" And I'm like, "It's going great, man. What games are you playing?" We'd have a little quick catch up or whatever. And then he'd be walking away, and I could hear him talking to his friends or whoever. And he's like, do you know who that guy is? Do you know? And it's just like that. I made that guy's day. I probably made that guy's week. I don't know. It was the best. It was such a cool feeling, and it was so joyous. And it just reminds you again, like, people are reading, people are loving it, people are having a great time. It was a lot of fun. I had another one of those ludicrous moments too, where I had done some artwork for the charity auction that they were putting together. So because I did the Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons series, those sketch covers, I'll do original sketches on a blank cover of Rick and things like that. And they tend to, the fans love them and things like that. And so I'd thrown a couple of those into the charity auction that Luke Gygax and the crew are putting together. I think it's for the Boys and Girls Club or whatever they're raising money for. And they were doing the live auction in the lobby bar area. And I just finished a game, and I was on my way to head to another game. And we're walking through the lobby, me and a friend of mine. And all of a sudden, just total luck of the draw. Never could have planned it in a million years. And they're just like, "Next item on the list is an original piece of artwork by author Jim Zub on Rick and Morty Dungeons and Dragons." And I was just like, "Really? Like, that's hilarious." And my buddy just looks over, and he's like, "I'm going to embarrass you." And I said, "What?" And he goes, "He's right here." And he just points at me, and the whole auction looks over and looks at me. And then the guy goes like, "Why don't you come up here and tell us about it?" And so all of a sudden I got to walk up there with the auctioneer, and I'm showing off the artwork that I did and whatever. And the bidding starts up, and the bidding goes kind of berserk. And I was a little bit thrown off in the best way possible. It's for charity, right?
Yeah, it's great.
But I had brought a bunch of extra comics. So after I ran my game, I would give my players free comics. A bunch of them brought comics to get signed as well, which is really sweet. And so I just had a bunch of extra comics in my bag that I was carrying with all my D&D stuff. And once the bidding went what I thought was pretty stupid, I just said like, okay, this is getting out of control. I'm going to throw in some free comics as well. And I just started pulling comics out of my bag and throwing them on the table. And then the bidding went crazier, and it was fun. It was like a really, really fun moment. And people really seemed to enjoy it. And I signed the stuff for the guy who won the bid, and he came over and the guy gave him a big hug. And it was just sweet. It was just like a really cool moment, you know. Yeah. These are the kind of things. This is why we do conventions, right? Because we can have really cool conversations online, and we can work here in my studio quietly, sort of chipping away at these stories. But I go that 1 week and I've got a dozen amazing anecdotes and really heartfelt conversations and reconnecting with people about the games we love, about the stories that influenced us, about all this stuff. You know, those are the memories that are really, really going to last above and beyond me quietly, you know, banging my fist against my head, trying to find the right alliteration that's going to hit just on that page, you know? So,
well, you certainly have generosity in your interactions. I mean, I've seen it. I think what's wonderful too, though, and I see it on your website, on your blog, just your willingness to share your ideas, share your scripts. You had a Twitter thread just this week, I think, or maybe last week, but just, you know, how to research, how you research Howard, how do you get better at writing, and, you know, the reading out loud. But you seem to not be an information hoarder. You're a knowledge sharer. And I imagine that must speak to why people also like working with you, and you have a successful product.
Yeah, I think it's the teacher thing. You know, I've been teaching at Seneca on the York University campus this is my 20th year, you know? And so I love when the light goes on, when a student really gets something, when they understand it, or when I'm able to sort of point them in the right direction, and then the problem solving kind of happens. And I love when people make things. Like, that's such a big part of what makes any kind of creative pursuit so wonderful, is that I don't think of entertainment as a passive thing. I don't just want to sit and have it hit me. I want to be involved with it most of the time. It's why I like tabletop role-playing games or video games or making, you know, stories or collaborating with creative teams. And so when other people express a desire to want to do that, I'm not here to steal it away from them and guard it. You know what I mean? I want people to really dig in, or even if they're not going to make stuff, appreciate what goes into making the stuff. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. I'm not, whenever I would get, you know, DVDs, and it would have making of material, I would always watch that stuff. I was always fascinated by, how did you get there? What was the process? You know, the commentaries and the little anecdotes. And when you realize that those kinds of things and the relationships that have built out of those creative pursuits, that social component is so strong and so fun. You know what I mean? That's the stuff that just like ignites for me. And if people are going to the effort to do that, I want to encourage them to do that. Like, I don't have time to do one-on-one critiques, and I can't, you know, mentor people. But if I can give a bunch of broad-based knowledge, and that gets people going, or keeps their momentum up, or whatever, then that's the next best thing, you know, as far as that goes.
That's fantastic. Sure. I'm looking at the time. Before we end the recording, there's one more question I'll ask, just because it popped into my head. Hither Came Conan podcast. He does a great job. Steven Orr. He narrates the books as a podcast form. But a question occurred that I know he would like to know the answer to. Mm-hmm. Matt Murray. Why does Matt Murray have the period after Matt? Is it just Matthew, or is it just an interesting nuance?
It's an interesting look. I don't have an answer for you.
Oh no!
So I wish I could definitely tell you there was some secret. It represents some symbolic thing. Yeah. You would have to ask him.
Okay.
I think I didn't notice it on the first or the second issue. And then I sort of noticed it because I swear I noticed it because I think he had brought it up, the Hither came Conan guy.
Yeah, I think Steven did.
And so I said, is that a typo? And then all I got back was no. And you're like, well, all right. I mean, that is an answer to the question.
Matt Murray, man of mystery.
Man of mystery. You know, so that's you'd have to ask the man himself. I will leave it to him to unlock that particular enigmatic element of it. I will tell you though that he didn't. Matt was the one who initiated all the nicknames that you see with the creative teams, with the, you know, Grim Jim Zub and all that kind of stuff. That was him, and I didn't know they were in there because the original letterproof I saw didn't have them, and then they put them in for the free comic book day after I had proofed the book. So the first time I saw them, it was literally like I got my comps and I cracked that thing open. And I was like, okay, this is so awesome. This is so special. And I think there was talk of it only being in the free comic book day. And then everyone responded so positively to it that they just like carried it forward. And now it's become like people will come over to me and I now know if they've really dug into my work on Conan, like, or if they were a fan of mine beforehand, because if they come over and they're just like, oh, this is Jim Zub. But if someone comes over and they go, this is Grim Jim Zub. And I'm like, well, clearly I know what you're here to talk about. You know what I mean? Like, it's a very different kind of a countenance there. And of course, the joke being that like, I'm this, you know, Canadian guy who just is having the time of his life. So the least grim possible.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, it's amazing. And it's a bit of a challenge. I know now we have to brainstorm them when we add new people to the creative team, or when people swap out, you're like, all right, we've done Devious. What are we doing now? Like,
well, and I noticed that Richard Starkings had changed, I believe, too, in the last issue. Yeah. I think it's the last issue, the one before. Yeah. We're
all having fun with these things. And again, I think that passion really comes through. You know, most of the time, whatever you're reading from Jeff in the back of the issue, he had to painfully edit down because he can write 4 times as much about the subject. I swear, you know, it's like he's begging for every word count that he can get on there because he loves talking about this stuff so much. We jump on calls now. Man, the last time we jumped on a call, it was the funniest thing. We were just hanging out chatting about Blackstone and a bunch of the bigger picture stuff and a lot of the big payoff for year 2 and how it's all going to kind of build. And I was throwing some crazy bombs out there and he was just shaking his head laughing because it's going to be so wild. But he was cracking open packages he had just got in the mail, and he had bought a bunch of original Weird Tales issues from Heritage Auctions, like, because he's a hardcore collector, and he's pulling these beautiful, you know, copies of original Howard, you know, stuff from Weird Tales out of these boxes. And I was like, oh my God, that's so amazing. You're going to have that. And he says, oh, no, I already have this issue. This one's in better condition. And he's like explaining how this one's doesn't have any spine ticks on it or whatever. And I'm just like, oh, you really are hardcore.
That's hardcore.
And so I was like, what are you going to do with your older copies? And he goes, oh, I'll take those to Howard Days. You know, I'll sell them there. Like, oh man, it's going to be cool. Yeah, awesome. It's going to be fun.
Well, thank you so much for speaking. And I think people are going to get a kick out of this interview. Thanks. And so I extend my thanks from them as well.
Hey, it's going to be this endless love fest, but I can't help it. None of this happens without the fan base. Yeah. You guys are crushing it. Like, the readership is so passionate right now. The old school readers, but really the current readership the good word of mouth has been so good continuously that you guys broke the barriers on the original collectors who had kind of given up on collecting Conan. They're coming back in droves. They're excited. They're buying Savage Sword. They're starting pull files. They're telling the retailer to order up. Like, that makes all the difference. And channels like yours and the number of reviews that come in and the people that are just like a steady drumbeat of, if you're not reading this book, you got to be reading it. If you're not checking it out, you know, you're missing something. Like, it makes a difference. It really does. The word of mouth that I get from retailers, the word of mouth that I get from, obviously, from Titan and from Heroic, they hear you and they are so thrilled that you tell us what is working. You know, I know there were complaints about the printing on Savage Sword #1 and some of the muddiness on the grayscale stuff, and I wasn't thrilled with that either. I think that
It's
art
disappointing.
deserves better, of course. And it's like, look, you got to do better. We got to do it right. Like, this is what we all want to see, the best product possible. And so I know there was quite a bit of discussion. The issue 2 got pushed back because they didn't want it to come out the same week as the monthly issue. We don't want to sort of be stealing each other's thunder.
Yeah.
And it was also a good chance to take an extra look at the black and white printing process and go, hey, can we be doing this better? Should we be doing this, differently?
Yeah.
And so I'm hopeful that as that stuff gets its way worked out, but when the fan base is vocal and when they're telling us what they like, then you're just going to get more of it. And that makes all the difference. So thank you. You guys have genuinely changed my career. You guys have just made this the most exciting project I've probably ever worked on. And I'm thrilled to see that momentum continue.
That's great. Thank you.
Thanks.
I do hope that you enjoyed this 2-part presentation of Conan's Compatriots, and a sincere thank you to Jim Zub for the generosity of his time. Be sure to check out Jim's work in Conan and elsewhere. I'm especially excited to see what he has for us in issue #2 of Savage Sword of Conan, releasing May 1st, not to mention issue 10 of the ongoing series, coming to us on April 24th. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to check out the series of episodes with author Brian D. Anderson and the legendary Steve Saffel. Thanks for watching, liking, consider subscribing, and until next time, take it easy, you Stygian Dogs.